Ike dominated the Fire Emblem Heroes voting poll recently. I don't play Fire Emblem Heroes, my iPad insists on rebelling against me like an angsty teenager and crashing every few minutes when I try, but that should speak to his popularity as a Fire Emblem protagonist. Also speaking to his popularity is the horde of upset fans, myself included, wondering why he's totally absent from Fire Emblem Warriors. And I mean totally absent. If this here nugget of intel is correct, Ike's not even slated to be DLC. People are upset because of no Hector, or Alm, or Ephraim, or their obscure favorite from deep within the archives of the series, but they're perhaps saltiest about Ike. In a nutshell, Ike is arguably one of the most popular and beloved Fire Emblem lords. He was specifically created to evoke echoes of Hector, another one of the most beloved lords. Fire Emblem newcomers may wonder why so many people clamor over him, shrugging and assuming it must be because of Smash Brothers. Veterans may know exactly why so many people like him, but they have a hard time putting it into words. Until now, prepare your minds! Oh, but let's dispel a certain silly notion first. This notion that Ike is only popular because he's some sort of wish fulfillment Mary Sue character, or Gary Stew, or what you will. I get where these people are coming from, sort of. Ike winds up very powerful, even more so than most Fire Emblem characters by the end of the game. Ike is blunt and stoic. Ike is the vehicle through which so many of the good things in the Tellius saga happen. However, I think much of this criticism comes from people not familiar with what exactly a Mary Sue is. Quote this page from springhole.net, home of the famed Mary Sue litmus test. A Mary Sue is a character, male, female, or otherwise, who is given or is expected to be given unwarranted preferential treatment and unearned respect, thereby compromising the integrity and believability of the story and or its characters. A hallmark of the Mary Sue is that he will have few, if any, meaningful challenges, hardships, or handicaps. Obstacles that exist for others are virtually non-existent or pose little to no challenge for a Mary Sue. In fact, it'll often seem that the very fabric of the universe is bending to accommodate the character. The glory of the Tellius saga needs to be experienced raw in all its glory, so to the best of my ability this will be a spoiler-free video, even if the Tellius saga is over a decade old. I will, however, mention that there are perhaps a few moments in the series that would seem at first to meet these Mary Sue prerequisites. People do put a lot of trust and faith in Ike, even for one so young as he is. Be that as it may, that does not make it unwarranted, and a lot of people seem to forget just how much Ike fails and has to run away with his tail between his legs before things finally start coming up roses for him. He does wind up very powerful and very trusted by the end of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn respectively, but that's after throwing himself through countless hardships and failures. In other words, it's a perfectly acceptable and respectable character arc about growth and maturity. Friends and family alike die because he's unable to stop it. Villains that should be dealt with early linger on because he's too weak to challenge them. Where most other Fire Emblem lords leap into the fray and put an end to the injustice around them, for the longest time Ike and company can only cut their way to an exit and run away because of how stacked the odds are against them. Path of Radiance, Chapter 11, Blood Runs Red, anyone? And Ike may be blunt, but that doesn't make him boring. He jokes around with his comrades, picks on poor Tormod, who's barely grown in the 3-year gap between Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, gives inspirational speeches to armies, and refuses to say die when surrounded by mobs of murderous soldiers and trying to defend a dying race. Strength and bravery don't automatically equate to a blank, boring personality. I want to delve in deeper, but that's hard without going into spoilers, maybe for another video. However, you, precious viewer, want to know why so many people actually like Ike, right? Not just why he's not a Mary Sue or a blank slate. Let's get started. We'll address the elephant in the room first before someone in the comments beats me to it. Yes, Ike's popularity is somewhat bolstered by Super Smash Bros. This is often the go-to counter for characters like Ike and Roy when one side sings their praises for them. People only like them because they were in Smash Bros. That's certainly not the only reason, but it is a reason. Ike made quite the splash in Brawl and spawned only 1,000 memes about fighting for his friends, giving no sympathy and ethering greatly, although as some have pointed out, Ike gives sympathy to just about everyone he meets in the Fire Emblem game, so that's almost a bit weird. Marth is the poster child for Fire Emblem, and due in part to his appearance in the Smash Bros. Series, thereby spawning an amiibo version, thereby spawning obligatory cameos in games like Codename Steam and Fire Emblem Fates, Ike is number 2 on that list. Yes, characters like Chrom and Lucina are highly popular too, but there ain't no Chrom amiibo, is there? Oh wait, there's one coming up for Fire Emblem Warriors. Well, there was an Ike amiibo first, so my point still stands. Super Smash Bros. Was indeed a significant reason so many people recognize Ike. However, that's not where it ends. Ike is notably different from most other Fire Emblem lords. The blue hair and overcompensating giant blade aside, Ike stands apart from most other lords in the series. Let's go over each reason why sequentially. Ike's personality was specifically designed to run counter to most lords. Marth is graceful and noble. Roy is graceful and noble. Eliwood, Roy's father, is also graceful and noble. Most of the lords in the series fall into that category. Ike, on the other hand, is down-to-earth, blunt, outspoken, occasionally teasing, and a little irritable. In a long history of nobles and royalty, Ike was designed to be an everyman players could relate to more. Leading off the last point, Ike has no royal or noble heritage, unlike every other Fire Emblem protagonist. He is a mercenary, basically a thug with a code of honor. While he is granted lordship for his services in Path of Radiance, he's rejected it and gone back to being a sellsword by the time of Radiant Dawn. Ike is the only lord with no defined love interest, and subsequently, the only lord who cannot get married by the end of the game. The interesting dynamic between Ike and Soren aside, which isn't proven to be romantic at all, Ike's love life in both games is barren. Except for Amy, but Ike is so put off by her that he actually hides in Soren's tent when she comes looking for him. Most Fire Emblem protagonists start with the class of Lord. Ike starts as a ranger in Path of Radiance and has to promote to Lord. In Radiant Dawn, he doesn't have any sort of Lord class at all, once again referencing his rejection of nobility. There are Dragon Lagoos in the Tellius saga that can be fought, but the final boss of neither Tellius game is a dragon, unlike most other Fire Emblem titles. Unless you count the thing Ashnard rides on, which you shouldn't. Ike is the only protagonist, besides Hector, who can wield an axe. Granted, it's only after promoting to 3rd tier in Radiant Dawn, but it makes him stand on his own. Although if I recall correctly, there is some sort of important Heroes character that wields an axe, but again, rebellious iPad. So in general, Ike just does things differently. It's a nice contrast against the graceful nobility of the other lords. The story, characters, and world of the Tellius saga are amazing. Quick! Without a guide, tell me where Midius' castle from Shadow Dragon is on a map. Can't do it. Path of Radiance players, where is the Grail Mercenary base in relation to Crimea? That's right, in the northwest, not far from Castle Crimea and Tellius' western shores. Of course, some Shadow Dragon nuts could probably answer the first question correctly, and someone who hasn't played Path of Radiance in forever might get the second question wrong. The point I was trying to make, however, is that there's a total difference in world building and story between the Tellius games and almost every other game in the series. In most of the games, stages are just set pieces for the next battle. Marth went to this castle and then killed some people. Other people didn't like that, so he went to their castle and killed them too. The Tellius games actually take the time to slow down and lay everything out on a map, replete with nation boundaries, color codes, and trails showing character and army advancement. The Tellius games on the whole are ridiculously wordy. You can either view this as a negative point, it can sometimes take some 20 or 30 minutes just to crunch through the text and reach actual gameplay, but it's also one of its strongest points. Tellius isn't just a set piece for battles between nice nations and traitorous nations. The whole game takes time to slow down, lay down history, explore its characters, build up to plot twists, and paint the land so you can remember it. That's one of the biggest reasons Ike is so beloved. The Tellius stories are about growth, putting aside differences, learning from mistakes, and doing what's right even when it hurts. And they make sure players understand everything that's at stake. Ike is the face of those stories that so impacted us. He calls back to the Fire Emblem stories that didn't just feel like great games, they felt like windows into another world, one we can learn from. Ike is both an everyman and an inspiration. Some people mock Ike as just being a wish fulfillment character. To an extent, that's true. He was purposefully designed to be an everyman we can more easily relate to, a low-born grunt trying to make his way through the world and forced to rise to the occasion. A prince with an army has sort of an obligation to reclaim their legacy. Ike had no obligation to safeguard Princess Alencia, get involved with Benyon politics, or lead an army. As a matter of fact, his tactician Soren, ever the voice of cold, hard logic, tries to dissuade Ike's good intentions and claims the future's better without Alencia in it. Ike ignores that logic and marches forward anyway. In a long line of graceful and noble Fire Emblem lords doing as destiny bids, Ike is an inspiration for stepping forward and leading when he didn't have to. Some people channel characters from fantasy franchises to give them inspiration, and Ike is often who I channel when I need confidence. Ike is basically a country bumpkin with little experience of the outside world, but he doesn't let that stop him from stemming up and acting on his beliefs anyway. It's encouraging to see him go from an awkward teenager trying to follow in his father's footsteps to a fearless general who inspires armies with his speeches. That's what I want to be. Not necessarily a general, but at least someone with the stones to step up and be a beacon of hope in spite of his origins, or perhaps because of them. Compared to a lot of other lords, Ike stands out for his power and reliability. It's almost a running joke that characters like Roy and Marth are so underwhelming in their own games. On the flip side, it's another running joke that characters like Ike and Hector can practically carry the games on their own. People have done Path of Radiance solo runs where Ike is the only character they use because he's that reliable when things get hairy, and that's before he starts swinging Ragnar around near the end of the game. This does partly bring up the issue of difficulty balance in the Tellius games, but the point remains that Ike stands above most other lords as a unit you can rely on, rather than baggage you're forced to take with you to beat the level. While he is a reliable unit, it's worth noting that he only truly becomes devastating in the final chapters of the games when he presumably has more powerful weaponry and skills like Ether. For most of the games, he's never so absurdly roided out that he's infallible, but he's also not the weak, sickly little lord you have to coddle and make excuses to your friends for. He can handle himself. He's not an escort mission, he's the pack leader, and he shows it. So that's why we like Ike. Whether you were curious or you wanted to hear it put into words, I hope this has helped clear up that enigma. He was, in part, popularized by Super Smash Bros., but that was only in addition to being a fresh take on the protagonist formula, the representative of the most lore-friendly and story-driven Fire Emblem titles, an example of excellent character growth and relatability, and one of the most reliable protagonists in the series. That's why people clamor for his inclusion in games like Heroes and Warriors. That's why people want to see more of Ike in general, and that's why so many people are salty he occasionally gets the short end of the stick. Here's hoping Hayashi is at least cognizant enough to include Ike at launch for Fire Emblem Warriors 2. Thanks for watching, everyone. Subscribe and stick around for the inevitable Fire Emblem Warriors review, because Lord knows it's coming.